and, you know, automatically call people to their phones. So when they look down at their phone, they get like sniped with a fucking dart and shit. They wake up in a room like tied to a chair, getting interrogated by me. Wouldn't that be funny?
Local operators, you commute with everything. And that makes you proportional to the identity, which means that you're a trivial degree of freedom. And so that's a proof that holography doesn't make sense. I just gave you a two-line proof that holography doesn't make sense. And of course, our job is now to find the loophole and figure out what went wrong in that argument. And if we can figure out what that was, then that will tell us how you get emergent locality. Okay. And so now let me make an analogy between this problem and a seemingly completely different problem, which is the problem of building a quantum computer.
Okay. All right. Okay, we talked about this yesterday.
I guess you had Scott Aaronson recently, right? So probably you guys talked a bunch about quantum computers already, and people can go look at that if they want to hear more about them. Sure. The fundamental, so a quantum computer is like a classical computer in that the sense it's made out of a bunch of bits, except that you want them.
Like, you didn't miss out on much. Like, and if you wanted to, as I said, like, get a recap of what we talked about yesterday, I did a good like science yap last night. That video is still live. You can check that out. It's published in the list. So, you know, we're talking a bit more about this now. It might lead to somewhere, might not.
I guess you had Scott Aaronson recently, right? So probably you guys talked a bunch about quantum computers already, and people can go look at that if they want to hear more about them. Sure. The fundamental, so a quantum computer is like a classical computer in that the sense it's made out of a bunch of bits, except that you want them to be quantum bits instead of classical bits, so they're called qubits. And instead of, so in a classical computer, the states of the...
But technically, we'll look at a qubit, right? This is the best way to explain it. A qubit, okay, we have, you know, 512 terabytes, you know what I mean? Or 512 gigs or whatever, and then 1 terabyte, right? But technically, 1,000 gigs is, one gig is 1,000 megabytes, but it's not, right? 1 gig is about 600 megabytes, right? It's about 650 megabytes, right? Now, the way to interpret that is 1 qubit is made up, right, of 1 qubit, right, which is technically made up of trillions of terabytes, right, in a way, right? And we can just think about this for a second as our biggest hard drive we can probably get available is like 500 terabytes, right, in theory. It wouldn't be an SSD, right? An SSD is like, what, 30 terabytes at most, right? Oh, sorry, it's like 300 terabytes at most, or 300 gigs, something like that, right? Look, we're getting late, but you can put a gigabyte, for example, or a terabyte into a qubit, but you can't put a qubit into the biggest amount of terabyte that exists, right? That's the way to explain it, right? So we have